Between the faded cracks of wealth and poverty, a woman walked barefoot, her belly swollen with life, her eyes sunken from days of hunger. Her name was Adunni Adebayo. Once a teacher, once a wife, once a woman full of laughter. But life had stripped her of titles, leaving only the weight of survival and the cries of an unborn child as company. She wore a torn purple gown that barely hid her dignity. Her hair was shaved low, not by fashion, but by consequence. In one hand she carried a small sack of roasted plantains that she couldn't sell the night before. In the other, she held her aching back, groaning softly with every step. She had not planned to stop at the golden gates of the mansion, but as the first jolt of pain tore through her belly, she collapsed right there, on the curb, outside the tallest gate in the neighborhood. The mansion was a palace, white walls trimmed with gold, guarded by cameras and stone lions. It was the kind of place where people like her never belonged. Behind those walls lived Chief Ayotunde Martins, a man of immense wealth, wrapped in tailored agbadas and silence. At 40, he had everything money could buy, and yet nothing that truly mattered. His heart was an abandoned mansion, quiet, cold, untouched, since his wife Bimpe had walked out on him 5 years earlier with nothing but her designer bags and bitter words. Love, he had decided, was a scam. But that morning, as he sipped his black coffee and stared out of his crystal-stained window, he saw her. A woman in pain, in purple, on the ground. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. All he knew was that something deep inside him stirred for the first time in years. "Let her in," he said to his security team, after a moment's hesitation. "Call the doctor." The gates opened, slowly, like the turning of destiny. Paramedics rushed in. She was lifted into the living room, a space she never imagined she'd see. Marble floors, chandeliers like falling stars, expensive perfumes clashing with the smell of fear and birth. There, under lights meant for kings and queens, Adunni gave birth to her son. Her screams echoed through the halls. Ayotunde watched from a distance, his heart pounding louder than he expected. When the baby finally cried, so did he. She named the child Ifedayo. "Love has become joy." She whispered it as she held him close, her tears soaking his cheeks. She had nothing in the world, but now she had everything. When she woke the next morning in a grand guest room with golden curtains and silk sheets, she thought she was dreaming, but the ache in her body reminded her it was real. And when the door opened, and Ayotunde walked in with a cup of tea and awkward gentleness, she sat up slowly, unsure of what to say. "You're safe now," he said. "You can stay until you're strong." She wanted to refuse. She didn't trust kindness anymore. Life had taught her that every gift had a price, but there was something in his eyes that made her pause. Not pity, but recognition. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. What started as silence turned into small talk. He would bring her books. She would cook him pepper soup. She told him stories about her village. He told her stories about how money never saved him from loneliness. They laughed, they argued, they healed, and slowly, something fragile and powerful began to bloom between them. But where love begins, enemies awaken. Bimpe returned like a storm. With expensive heels and sharp words, she barged into the mansion one Sunday afternoon and saw Adunni sitting beside Ayotunde, feeding baby Ifedayo. "So this is what you've become?" she spat. "Sleeping with your maid? Let me guess, she's after your money." Adunni froze. Her past came rushing back. The insults, the shame, the world reminding her she didn't belong. She quietly stood, held her baby, and disappeared into her room. That night, while the house slept, she packed her bag. She left a note on the bed. No drama, no demands, just quiet heartbreak. And by the time Ayotunde woke up, she was gone. He tore through the house searching, called every hospital, every friend. He even drove himself through the markets of Lagos, asking strangers if they'd seen a woman in a purple gown with a baby. Rain poured, horns blared, but he didn't stop. He finally found her 3 days later, in a wooden shelter behind a church, rocking Efidayo with tired eyes. She didn't speak. She couldn't. But he knelt in front of her and whispered, "Don't run again. I don't want to save you. I want to build with you. I don't care where you're from. I care where we're going." For the first time in a long time, she smiled. 1 year later, the mansion gates opened, not for cars or politicians, but for women like her, women who had been abandoned, beaten, and silenced. Adunni stood tall in a beautiful purple iro and buba, cutting the ribbon to launch a foundation that would shelter and empower struggling mothers. The press surrounded her. Ayotunde stood proudly beside her, Efidayo asleep on his shoulder. The woman in purple was no longer forgotten. She had not only found love, she had found herself. And it all began the day her water broke outside the Golden Gates,